Let's continue on in our series all about Jesus as we are moving on into chapter 6 and continue on in the second part of the Sermon on the Mount. We talked last week about the last section in general was about righteousness and living a righteous lifestyle and the higher standard that Jesus is calling his followers to of righteousness. And this week, I'm going to be talking about what Jesus has to say about giving, titling this lesson, Giving in Secret. So, like I said, Matthew 5, it talks about righteousness, and it's raised that bar for what this righteous style is supposed to look like. But Matthew 6 is dealing more with the motives behind righteous acts. So, it's one thing to look righteous, it's another thing and act righteous, it's another thing to actually have good motivations behind those. So, Matthew 6 lists out basically 3 examples of righteous acts, and it discusses the motivations behind them. And so, really, let me just start you off with the first verse to get an idea. Matthew 6:1, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So, Jesus knows how we work. God tells us to be righteous, so we make it this competition to see who can be the most righteous. That's just kind of our human nature. We want to make it a competition. We want to be the best at it. We want to use it to make us look good. And what Jesus is saying is, don't do righteous things just so that others notice your righteousness. He's like, hey, if you do good things just to be recognized, that recognition is all the reward that you're going to get. But if you do good things regardless of the recognition that you receive, God's going to notice, and your rewards are going to be much greater. And so this first verse, it's kind of like the thesis statement to a paper. Like, this is just summing up what the majority of chapter 6 is going to be talking about. And so we're going to start with the first example that he gives, and that's giving to the poor. And the Bible calls us to give to the poor. We see it all through Scripture. I mentioned a few verses the other day, but 1 John 3:17 through 18, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and truth. So, giving to the poor is something that that would be considered to be a righteous act, right? It's something we're told to do. It's something we're commanded to do. And so this idea is Jesus is going to talk to us about this idea of giving to the poor in this lesson. First, before we really get into this, I actually want to show you 2 different videos, and I kind of want to contrast these videos one to the next. So the first one I want to show you, let me just, I'll hit play. It's going to play on the left there. The audio is a little rough, so sorry. It's not a professional video. It was a kind of a candid video that someone took. And so just listen closely. Just basically get the gist of what's happening from it.
It's just because of the sign. We actually have a policy against soliciting. You're more than welcome to dine in and be our guest. It's not for your guys, feel uncomfortable. That's fine. It's just easy to make sure that you're not soliciting. Okay? All right. So I'm totally fine with you being comfortable doing whatever you feel is best. It's just your policy. Okay? All right. My name's Karen. Sorry about that. Is there anything I can do for you, sir? Okay, I'll do for you. Sweet, yeah. Well, if you need my name's Meredith, okay? You said your name? What's your name? Charlie? Charlie! You got it. Sorry about that. I have a video. What do you need, Charlie? I am, and that's Pastor.
Okay, so I know that's hard to hear. Let me kind of explain what's going on. You probably got the gist of what was happening. Basically, Chick-fil-A, the manager walks outside. There's a homeless man sitting on the curb outside the Chick-fil-A. And basically, she just super politely tells him, hey, it's our policy. You can't solicit outside of our outside of our building, so you can't ask for money. But she basically says, "Hey, here's some food. We would love for you to either be our guest and come inside and eat in there. You're welcome to eat in our dining room, or you can eat out here. You're welcome to do that. We just ask that you don't ask people for money here. But hey, here's some food, like." And then she shakes his hand. She asks his name. She is very friendly to him. And actually, at the very end of the conversation, I don't know if you caught the last thing that he asks her. He says, as she's walking back in, he says, "Are you a Christian?" And she says, "Yeah, my dad's actually a pastor." And that's the end of the interaction. It's just a little candid interaction that happens. So keep that video in mind, and I want you to watch this next one.
So there's been a lot going on because of this pandemic, and every day when I go and get food, I always see this homeless person, but today I want to give back, so I'm going to get them food and I'm going to give them $20. So let's see, guys. So the guy who I've been seeing is actually like walking away, so I'm actually going to go up to him and ask him what he wants to eat, and then I'm going to go get his food for him. Just pulled into Chick-fil-A right now. The line's pretty long, so I'm hoping he doesn't think like I'm leaving him, but he wants 2 chicken sandwiches and a large fry. All right, guys, there's 2 sandwiches in there. I'm putting $20 in there, and I got the fries. We're going to go up to right there, guys. Here you go, man. There's 2 sandwiches in there, fries, and here's a water. Thank you. You have a good one, man. He was really thankful, guys. During these times, we got to make sure we're not just looking out for ourselves, but we are taking care of others who do need help.
Okay, so what's the difference between these 2 videos? I want you to kind of ponder that question. It's very, very popular today for influencers to give to the poor for views. You see it all over TikTok. There are influencers who make their entire channel all about giving to people who need something. I mean, think of Mr. Beast, who gives thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars away to people. His videos are great to watch. They're fun to watch. I love watching them. Like they make you feel good to watch, and that's the reason that they get views. Everyone loves to see a person get helped in need. But the question you have to have is, how genuine is it? You see those 2 videos, those side by side. That girl, the manager of Chick-fil-A on the left, bringing food to a homeless person outside their store. She was not doing it for views. It was just somebody happened to record as she brought out food. It was not for production or anything. She simply wanted to give this man food, shake his hands, ask him what his name is, and invite him into their store, or welcome him to eat out there, whichever he was more comfortable with. Very genuine, very just, she did a good act just because it was the right thing to do. Whereas on the video on the right, the second video we watched, yeah, he did a great thing. He gave a homeless man some food and money, and it was great. Perfectly acceptable thing to do, and his heart may have been genuinely wanting to help someone. But you have to think about it as well as the fact that, what was he doing? He was recording it for views. This was for his TikTok. This was so that you see him put the $20 in the bag. You see him order the food and hand the food over to the homeless man, and he talks about, like, how he wants to do something good, and we should all. It ends with this challenge. There's emotional music playing. It's a production, and it is for views. And as great feeling as it makes you feel to watch it, in the end, the biggest difference between those 2 is one is with the end goal of receiving views on TikTok, and the other is simply to offer a homeless person food. And so we see those are just 2 examples. It was the same food, the same Chick-fil-A in both situations, but one is very genuine, one is very put on and fake feeling almost. So I bring those up as examples before we see what is it that Jesus has to say about all this. So let's continue. We read verse 1. Let's continue on through verse 4. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. So Jesus basically says, hey, when you give to the needy, don't just shout it out on the streets for everybody to hear. He says, don't let it be proclaimed by trumpets. Now, this was not something that was necessary. We have no record of this being done, that people would proclaim their giving by trumpets. It's exaggeration. He's using a little bit of hyperbole for dramatic effect here. Like, hey, don't just. He's kind of being funny. He's like, don't just go out and like toot your own horn and say, I'm so great, and look at me, I'm giving money to the homeless. Look at how much I'm giving to the homeless. Everybody look at me. Make sure you see as I hand it to them. Oh, wait, they're not looking. Okay, now here you go. He's like, don't do that. Just when you give to the needy, in fact, be so secretive about it that you don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Keep it a secret. And so the people that are giving publicly, he says, they do it so that everybody can see how generous they are, and that's what their reward is. Their reward is to be respected by people who are like, ooh and ah at how much money they give, or at how often they give, or whatever it is to the needy. He's like, that's what their reward is. They wanted it, that's what they got. But the reward to offer, to give to in secret, is so much greater. He says your reward is greater in heaven. It doesn't necessarily mean that God's going to double your money and give it back to you. This isn't even. You may not see those rewards come back to you on earth. Now, I do believe that the Bible indicates that a generous heart is blessed, and I think that oftentimes we do see there are financial benefits that come from it as a reward. God does give rewards. He does bless people financially. The Bible often uses that as one means at which God does bless us. And so if we are living a righteous lifestyle, the Bible does indicate blessings do come alongside of that. But those blessings may not always look like what you think they're going to look like. And they may not, there may be rewards that we see that come in heaven. And those rewards will be far greater than anything we could receive on earth. And so, so the difference is, and when you actually give with a good giving heart that is selfless and not for the show of others, then God notices, and He's keeping account of that, and He will reward you in kind. Now, does that mean that you can only give to the needy if nobody knows about it, right? Can you only ever give money to somebody on the street if nobody's looking? Let's look at some examples in Scripture. When we have these kinds of questions, it's good to go look at Scripture and see what we can find. So, some examples. Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 45. This is talking about the early church here. And it says, they, the early church, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. So I'd say, based on reading this, that it's clear that people were aware of the early church selling their property and giving to the poor, because it's recorded in Acts. Hey, you're suddenly going to see people that had a bunch all of a sudden not having a bunch, and they move on to this, they're living with other Christians almost on this commune, and they're all selling their possessions so that they can give freely to the needy. And it's this thing, like, everybody starts talking about, look at what the Christians are doing. Now, I think it's pretty clear as you read this, it's not something that's for show. This is just, it's recording what Christians' early church was doing at the time. And sometimes the Bible actually even does list the givers by name. Acts 4:36 through 37 says, Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. So we've heard of Barnabas before. Paul talks about him elsewhere. Says, sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet for them to do with what they needed to give to the poor. And so Barnabas here is called out by name. He says, like, hey, this is Barnabas did this great thing. He donated this money. Now, it doesn't again say that Barnabas did it to be recognized in Scripture. Barnabas probably didn't know that his name would be immortalized in Scripture for all of time because he sold a field. In fact, he probably had no clue of that. But we do see that it didn't have to, Barnabas is not cursed because people knew about it. In fact, Paul tells people about it. If you read the Old Testament, you see people who give and donate to the contributions towards the tabernacle and temple. And many of those people are listed by name as well. And so the Bible doesn't discourage giving in a sense where it is known. Um, Jesus himself, in the chapter we just read before in Matthew 5, he says, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." He wants the world to see how Christians act. He's like, let your actions be a light that points you towards Jesus. Let your actions be this light. That's what you want. You want people to be pointed towards Christ by the way that you live your life. And so, yeah, sure, it's okay for people to see it. So why then, if all of this is true, why does Jesus say to let the world see our good in one chapter, and then in the next chapter, he's telling us to do our goods secretly? Why is that? Well, the answer, I think, is found in verse 1. It says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them." I think that last phrase there is very important. To be seen by them. So don't be careful not to practice your righteousness to be seen by them, to be seen by others. So don't practice it with that purpose of being seen by everyone. If your good deeds catch the attention of others, that's fine. It's totally fine. That girl in the first video, that's a perfect example of it. She went and did something good, didn't know somebody was going to record, and guess what? Somebody recorded it. You see, if you were to search, in fact, keeping with Chick-fil-A theme, if you were to search Chick-fil-A manager gives food to homeless person, you'll find other cases and news articles on such things. There's one on a kid at Burger King that did this. One of my friends, somebody I went to college with, he actually went viral on news stories for giving food and praying for a homeless person. But they were things that were done in a public space that was not meant to draw attention to himself. Somebody else took notice and said, "Wow, that's incredible. More people should be like that. I'm going to record this and show people what this individual did." And so if your good deeds do catch attention of others, that's great. That's fine. That is letting your light shine for the world to see. But don't do them for that purpose. That girl didn't walk out and look to make sure, hey, can you video what I'm about to do here? Thank you. And then make sure, oh, the audio is not very good. Can you get a little closer? Let's put a soundtrack under that. Before you know it, you'd have the second video. So don't give to the poor so that everyone can see how generous you are. Give to the poor because that is what God calls you to do. Proverbs 19:17, "Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done." Proverbs 14:31, "Whoever oppresses the poor shows contempt for their maker, but whoever is kind to the needy honors God." Giving to the poor is an act of worship to God. If when you lend to the poor, it is like lending to the Lord. This is an act of worship. Being kind to the needy honors God. That is an act of honoring God. And so when you do what God commands you to do, when you follow God's commandments and perform righteous acts such as giving to the poor, as Jesus uses in this example, it is a form of worship to God. God accepts it warmly, like incense from an offering. It is something that you are doing to help somebody poor, but in actuality, you are doing it as if you're doing it to the Lord. And so it is an act of worship for God. And so when you take a look at what people are doing, look at their motives, because Jesus is saying, hey, I want you to do these righteous acts. I want the world to see how great Christians are. They're awesome. I think they're awesome. More people should know about the love that I have that these people that follow me live out in their lives. But don't do it so that you're seen. Do it so that your righteousness is hidden. And if you have to do it in secret in order to not make it a public thing, then sure, do that. Do it in secret. And we'll see that as we talk about tithe in a later lesson, you'll see that Jesus even talks about tithe as well. That tithing, you're not supposed to tell publicly what you are tithing. You need to do that in secret. And that needs to be something that's between you, the church, and God. And so there are times to be secret, and there are times to just simply do something because it's the right thing to do. And it's a form of worship to God. So, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. Otherwise, I will talk to you next week.